Will the Lord be with you? I had a friend whose name was Sam, who in many ways kind of drove me nuts in college. He arrived at Wittenberg University, our alma mater, with a certain air about him. He had come off a state playoff run in high school, and my football team was one and whatever. He had a 4.0 GPA, which at the time was the highest you could possibly get. And he was dating his high school sweetheart, who he eventually got married to. He kind of had it all, and to be honest, I was a little jealous of him. We first met on the ultimate frisbee field. We were both in what I would call football recovery, which is what happens when you're an athlete through high school, and then all of a sudden in college you're not an athlete anymore, and you have to figure out how you're going to expend all of this extra energy. He was athletic, but he lacked this refined skills of ultimate frisbee, just like myself. So we were oftentimes paired up with one another to defend one another on the field. Sam was an offensive lineman in high school, so he weighed probably 1.5, maybe even 2 times what I did at the time. So I felt a little bit of confidence going into the ultimate frisbee field, often when I guarded him. The problem is that Sam actually was faster than I was, and I had a difficult time guarding him. He caught deep passes over my head, which instead of me catching deep passes over his head. And it kind of drove me nuts, as I said. Sam lived this way on the field, but also in his labs as a science major, and in his dormitory, and as a leader in the campus ministry. Sam was a winner. Sam was an achiever. He always went 110%. I think Sam would get along well with our friend Peter. Peter always seems to go 110%. Peter is an achiever. Peter is a winner. Peter takes great pride in all of his successes. This morning we are continuing our journey from the crowds and to the cross. And we've come all the way to the very end of Jesus' earthly ministry, in one of his very last days on earth. He's made his way. He's been arrested in the garden, and he's made his way down and across the Kidron Valley, through the temple gate, or the gate into Jerusalem. He's passed by the temple, and he's made it to the court of the high priest Caiaphas. Because that's what achievers do. Achievers follow their Lord all the way, no matter where he takes them, even if it's into the face of danger. But this has been a particularly difficult day for Peter. Overachieving Peter has had one of those days, if you know what I mean. You remember last week when it was just the night before and Jesus gathered his disciples around the table, but before he did that, he offered to wash his disciples' feet. And what did Peter say when Jesus came to him to wash his feet? Not my feet. My whole body, if you're going to wash anything. And Jesus kind of slapped him on the wrist and said, "Hey, Peter, we'll just wash your feet. You need to be served before you can serve others." And at that same table, it was Peter who was the one that said, "Jesus, I'm going to follow you all the way to the end." And Peter said, or Jesus said, "I'm not so sure, Peter, you'll be able to do that. No one can come with me where I am going." And in the garden, just a few moments ago on that Good Friday, it was Peter who took his sword out and sliced off the ear of the Roman guard who was arresting Jesus. And now he's in the courtyard, right outside the courthouse of Caiaphas, and he's left alone. It's been a rough day for Peter, hasn't it? But I commend him. He keeps on trying. He keeps on following Jesus wherever he goes, because that's what achievers do, isn't it? They keep on trying, even when the going gets tough. Maybe you've had one of those times or experiences in your life, where no matter how hard you work, how hard you try, the results that you're hoping for just aren't coming as quickly as you would like them to. I can tell you, for me, it happens every single time I do a plumbing project. I think it's just a little leak. I'm sure I can figure this out. YouTube, It'll teach me everything I need to know. I'm a little crafty. I'm kind of handy. I can figure this plumbing project out. And then I end up spending more time going back and forth to the stinking hardware store, fixing the mistakes that I make, than I do actually solving the problem. We have a saying in our house that skippers don't give up. We don't quit in the middle of a project. But why does it feel like calling a plumber is quitting in the middle? My hunch is that we've all had those days, and not just those frustrating days in which we can't figure out a plumbing project, but a day where we feel beat up, confused, maybe frustrated, or even a little discouraged. The results that we hope for don't seem very achievable. But what do we do? When the going gets tough, we pull up our bootstraps and we keep working. We keep trying because that's what we do. Peter is convinced that he is going to follow Jesus all the way to the end. No matter where you go, Jesus, I will follow you. I'm going to fulfill my promise, and if I can't, I'm going to keep trying and work like I can. Anybody watch the Michigan State game yesterday? If you're a Michigan fan like me, you know that Mo Wagner is one of their best players. And in the first half of the basketball game, Mo Wagner was 0 for 7. Couldn't buy a bucket, you might say. Missed layups, missed wide open three-pointers that he usually drains. My hunch is that Coach Beeline at halftime didn't say, hey, Mo, you're having a hard day. Just take a seat in the second half and we'll find somebody to replace you. We coach confidence. We remind people that they have gifts and that they have talents and that they can succeed if they keep on trying. Keep on shooting. Keep on firing the ball. We believe in ourselves. We have the power to succeed, we say. We're going to paddle the boat like our life depends on it. We're going to set goals to lose weight. We're going to work harder for that promotion because that's what we do. We're achievers. There's nothing inherently wrong with that either, is there? There's nothing inherently wrong with trying your best, going after it with all your gusto. I want my kids to live like that. I want my kids to live like Peter, to live like my friend Sam did. But I believe there's a significant risk. A risk in our results-oriented culture that our ability to succeed defines our identity. Another way of saying that might be that there's a temptation in our society to measure our identity based on our achievements or even our appearances, as opposed to our identity in Christ. I think Peter's denial in John chapter 18 offers us a corrective to this temptation, a corrective to this risk, you might say. The scene is very similar to a Law and Order episode, where you have two interrogation rooms with detectives intimidating the accused to try to get a confession of guilt out of them. On the one hand, you have Jesus in the courthouse with Annas, the father-in-law of Caiaphas, which does kind of make me wonder, why did Caiaphas get his name in the Bible, but this other disciple that goes with Jesus not get his name in there? It's a little curious. So there you have Jesus in the courthouse with Annas, the father-in-law of Caiaphas, whose family is ultimately going to be responsible for giving Jesus a death sentence. It's an intimidating situation for Jesus. And on the outside, in the other interrogation room, if you will, you have Peter in the courtyard, warming himself by a dumpster fire, and he's getting interrogated by some B-team set of guards. You know the results. In the face of the interrogation by a detective who has much power and exercises even some physical intimidation and slapping of Jesus, Jesus remains true to his identity. Look, everything I've taught in your synagogues, everything I have taught has been in your synagogues or in your temple. Nothing I have said is hidden from you. You don't need me to testify. Ask one of my disciples. Ask one of my witnesses. I don't need to defend myself. If I'm the accused, I shouldn't be on the stand. Meanwhile, as Jesus is claiming his faith in his disciples, Peter is outside being accused by a woman security guard. And if you were here last week, you know the social standing of women in that society. This woman has no power over him. She has no power to accuse him or even to punish him for any wrong that he commits. But what does Peter do? She asks, hey, aren't you also one of his disciples? Aren't you with all the other guy that walked in with Jesus? It's a legitimate question that she asks. She's seen what's happening. She's standing at the gate. She's watched Jesus and this unnamed disciple go in, and this unnamed disciple come out and bring Peter a little bit closer in. And what does Peter say? Nope, I'm not him. I'm not with them. I think Peter's denial of Jesus is not so much a denial of Jesus' identity as much as a denial of his own identity. The question even begs itself to recognize that Jesus is worth following. There are people that are following Jesus, and aren't you also one of his followers? Peter denies not Jesus, but Peter denies his discipleship to Jesus. He denies that he's a follower of Jesus. It's a denial of his identity rather than of Jesus' identity. It's a remarkable contrast, really. In the face of danger, Jesus remains true to his identity, allegiant to the purposes that God has set before him, even in the face of danger, while Peter folds under the pressure of a slave girl. Jesus points to his teachings, in which he has claimed that I am the bread of life, I am living water, I am the light of the world, I am the way, the truth, and the life, I am the good shepherd, I am the resurrection and the life. Peter, pressed by random guards and servants, in his fear and insecurity, says, I am not. I am not one of his. I am not his disciple. And then the cock crows. And Peter realizes, no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't live up to the promises that he made to Jesus. You see, for so long, Peter had measured his identity based on how well he could achieve things for Jesus. His appearance before the other disciples. So when that cock crows, Peter's identity is called into question. I was talking with a friend this week about the challenge it is to live a whole and integrated life. A life in which we are as secure in who we are in front of our friends as we are in public before others. We lamented how insecurities can sneak up on us and cause us to wonder what others think of us. They can cause us to second guess the words that we say. They can even cause us to be stunned into silence when we live outside of the security, our security, as our identity is in Christ, outside of our identity as God's children. I think this was the challenge for Peter, because his identity was so based on what he did. His denial of Jesus and his discipleship to Jesus was not just a feeling of guilt that he had done something bad, but a struggle with his own shame that he was bad. The good news of this story is that Peter's story doesn't end in John chapter 18. Just a few chapters after Jesus has been resurrected, Peter encounters Jesus yet again on the Sea of Galilee around a different fire. And Jesus knows that to fully restore Peter to being to be the leader of the church that he will become, he must address both the guilt that he feels for denying his discipleship to Jesus, and the shame that calls into question his identity as a child of God. So what does Jesus do? 3 times he asked Peter, "Do you love me?" And 3 times Peter affirms, "You know I love you, Lord." It's an act of forgiveness. Jesus faces Peter's pain, acknowledges his guilt, and forgives Peter for screwing up. But that's not all. And just a few verses later, Jesus invites Peter, "Follow me. Follow me." The same exact words Jesus used when he first met Peter on the Sea of Galilee way back at the beginning of the gospel. When Peter was mending his nets and preparing for a day at sea, and Jesus comes and says, "Come, follow me, be my disciple." Jesus' invitation to follow him pronounces to Peter that he belongs again, that he belongs as Jesus' disciple. No longer does Peter have to be defined by his achievements, by his identity can be found in his belonging to Jesus Christ. I think this presents us with a unique and awesome opportunity as the church in the 21st century. For the invitation to belong is one of the greatest strengths of the church today. To belong to Jesus and to belong to a community. We live in a disconnected world. A world in which no matter how young or old you are, how rich or poor you are, how successful or not you are, we all have a longing to belong. To belong to Christ and to belong to one another. We want to fit in. We want someone to make space for us. So my question for you this morning is, what would your life be like if your identity was not based on what you could achieve or what you could accomplish or the successes in your life? How would your life change if you could count on your security coming from knowing that you are loved and accepted by Jesus Christ himself and by Jesus Christ's representatives here on earth in the church? My friends, Peter's life was transformed when he realized that kind of love and acceptance. And that same invitation that Jesus invited Peter into is available to you and to me today. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.